Captain Han Dae-ho stood alone on the bridge of the UES Resilience. The stars outside the main viewport looked the same as they had 43 years ago when he first stepped aboard this ship as a young lieutenant. But everything else had changed. The bridge was quiet during the night cycle. Most of his crew slept in their quarters below. Only the essential watch officers remained at their stations, monitoring the ship's slow journey through space. Han liked these quiet hours. They gave him time to think and remember. He walked slowly around the bridge, his hand trailing along the worn metal railings. Every surface told a story. The scorch mark on the communications panel came from a plasma fire during the Battle of Centauri. The dent in the captain's chair arm rest happened when debris struck the bridge during the Vegan War. The patchwork on the main display screen showed where they had replaced it 3 times over the years. The Resilience was old. Fleet Command reminded him of this fact every month. Her hull showed the scars of dozens of battles. Her engines needed constant maintenance to keep running. Her weapon systems were 2 generations behind the newest ships. Her armor plating had been patched and repatched so many times that the original factory specifications were just a memory. But she was still flying, she was still fighting, and she was still home to 300 souls who trusted her to keep them safe in the darkness between stars. Han heard footsteps on the metal deck behind him. He did not turn around. Only one person would come to the bridge at this hour. "Good evening, Commander Park," he said, without looking back. "Good evening, Captain," replied Commander Park So-min as she approached with 2 cups of coffee. The steam rose from the hot liquid in the recycled air of the bridge. "I thought you might want some company." Han accepted the coffee gratefully. Park had served as his first officer for 15 years. She knew his habits better than he knew them himself. She also knew when he needed to talk and when he needed silence. They stood together at the viewport, watching the stars slowly drift past. The Resilience was traveling at half-light speed toward the Tau Ceti system. It would take them another 6 days to reach their destination. Just another routine patrol mission. Just another week of keeping the peace in a galaxy that seemed to grow more dangerous every year. "The new report came in from Fleet Command," Park said quietly. She handed him a data pad with the latest intelligence updates. Han read through the routine information: supply shipments, personnel transfers, maintenance schedules. Then he reached the classified section. His expression grew serious as he read. "They want to retire her," he said finally. "Yes, sir. Admiral Kang thinks the Resilience has served long enough. He wants to transfer the crew to newer ships and send her to the breaker yards." Han felt something twist in his chest. The breaker yards, where old ships went to die, where their metal was recycled into new vessels that would never have the character or soul of the ships they replaced. "What do you think, Commander?" he asked. Park was quiet for a long moment. She looked around the bridge that had been her second home for so many years. "I think Admiral Kang has never served on a ship like this one. He doesn't understand what makes her special." Han nodded. That was the problem with the younger officers in Fleet Command. They looked at ships as numbers on a chart. Hull integrity, percentages, weapon system efficiency ratings, engine output calculations. They did not understand that a ship was more than the sum of her parts. "Tell me about the time we outran the Arcturus pirates," Han said. Park smiled. She had heard this request many times before. "Our engines were damaged, and we were carrying refugees from the Belmont colony. The pirates had 3 ships, and we had maybe 60% power. But we made it to the Vega system anyway, because Chief Engineer Yu found a way to boost our output by rerouting power from the life support backup systems. And because Navigator Lee calculated a micro-jump that should have been impossible with our damaged navigation array. And because the Resilience refused to give up," Han added. "She kept flying when any other ship would have broken apart." They shared more stories as the night cycle continued. the time they held off an entire enemy fleet while defending the mining station at Kepler 442. The diplomatic mission to the Proxima system, where they prevented a war through patience and careful negotiation. The rescue operation in the asteroid belt, where they saved 200 miners from a collapsing facility. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of the ship's history. Each mission had added to her legend. The Resilience was not just a vessel. She was a symbol of what humanity could accomplish when they refused to accept defeat. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Park moved to the communications station and accepted the transmission. Her face grew pale as she read the contents. "Captain, you need to see this immediately." Han took the message pad and read quickly. The words hit him like a physical blow. He read the message twice to make sure he understood correctly. "Alert all senior staff," he said quietly. "Full briefing in 1 hour." "Sir, should I wake the crew?" "Not yet. Let them sleep a little longer. They will need their rest for what's coming." Park left to gather the senior officers. Han remained alone on the bridge, staring at the message that would change everything. The collective had issued an ultimatum to humanity. The massive alliance of alien species that controlled much of the galaxy's core regions had decided that humans were a threat to galactic stability. They viewed human expansion as reckless and dangerous. They considered human military doctrine to be primitive and brutal. Humanity had 7 days to withdraw from 12 star systems. 7 days to abandon colonies that housed millions of people. 7 days to prove they were willing to submit to collective authority. If humanity refused, the collective would use force to remove them. Their fleet was already moving toward human space. 300 ships carrying the most advanced weapons and shields in known space. Enough firepower to destroy every human world in the disputed systems. Han looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, families were sleeping peacefully in their homes. Children were dreaming of becoming Starship officers. Scientists were working on projects that would benefit all of humanity. Artists were creating beauty that would last for generations. All of it was about to be threatened by an enemy that saw humans as nothing more than dangerous animals to be caged. The Resilience creaked softly around him, her old hull settling into the rhythm of deep space travel. The sound was comforting and familiar. Han placed his hand on the nearest bulkhead and felt the gentle vibration of her engines. "Well, old girl," he said quietly to his ship, "looks like we have one more fight ahead of us." The stars continued to drift past the viewport, cold and distant and beautiful. Han stood watching them until his officers arrived for the briefing that would begin humanity's greatest test. The senior staff gathered in the conference room exactly 1 hour later. The worn table had seen countless meetings over the years, but never one quite like this. Han looked at each face around the table. These people had served with him through peace and war. They had earned his trust through years of difficult decisions and dangerous missions. Commander Park So-min sat to his right, her notebook ready. Chief Engineer Yu Jin-woo occupied the chair he had claimed 15 years ago, his weathered hands folded on the table. Dr. Kim Tae-sung looked tired but alert. Navigator Lee Soo-jin appeared nervous but focused. Lieutenant Choi Bo-ram sat straight, in her chair, ready for whatever orders would come. "Ladies and gentlemen," Han began, "we have received an ultimatum from the collective." He read the message aloud. The room grew very quiet as the words sank in. 7 days, 12 star systems, millions of lives hanging in the balance. When he finished reading, Dr. Kim spoke first. "Captain, their fleet outnumbers ours 3-1. Their technology is more advanced than anything we have. How can we possibly fight them?" Chief Engineer Yu slammed his hand on the table. The sound echoed in the small room. "Numbers don't tell the whole story, Doctor. Our ships may be older, but they're built to last. And they're crewed by people who know how to fight. Fighting spirit won't stop their plasma cannons," Dr. Kim replied, "or their quantum shields. We need to be realistic about our chances. Being realistic and giving up are two different things, Lieutenant Choi said firmly. We've faced bad odds before. Navigator Lee Soo-jin had been studying her datapad during the discussion. She looked up suddenly. Captain, I've been analyzing the collective fleet movements from the intelligence reports. They're advancing very slowly, almost leisurely. What does that tell you? Han asked. They're giving us time to evacuate because they don't think we'll actually fight. They expect us to run. Chief Engineer Yu grinned. Then we'll have the advantage of surprise. Han stood and walked to the small viewport in the conference room. The stars looked the same as always, peaceful, eternal. It was hard to believe that somewhere out there, hundreds of enemy ships were moving toward human space with the intention of destroying everything humanity had built. Commander Park, what's the status of our weapon systems? All functional, Captain. Not the newest models, but Lieutenant Choi has kept them in perfect condition. Chief Yu, how are our engines? Running at 85% efficiency. I can probably squeeze out a bit more if we need it. Dr. Kim, medical supplies? Fully stocked. I've been preparing for casualties since we received the message. Han turned back to his officers. Navigator Lee, I want you to study every battle the collective has fought in the past 10 years. Look for patterns in their tactics. Find their weaknesses. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Choi, review our weapon configurations. See if there are any modifications we can make to improve our effectiveness. Already on it, Captain. The meeting continued for another hour as they discussed logistics and preparations. When the senior staff finally left, Han remained behind with Commander Park. What are you thinking, Captain? She asked. I'm thinking about something my first captain told me 40 years ago. He said that the enemy's greatest weapon is often their own confidence. Han left the conference room and began walking through the ship. This was something he did whenever important decisions needed to be made. The corridors of the Resilience told stories that no report could capture. In the engine room, he found Chief Engineer Yu and his team already at work. They were installing new power couplings that would allow them to redirect energy more efficiently during combat. The chief looked up from his work. Captain, these old engines have some tricks the collective has never seen. They're designed for endurance, not speed, but endurance wins long battles. How so? Their ships are built for quick victories, overwhelming firepower, advanced shields, fast engines. But what happens when the battle lasts longer than expected? When systems start overheating? When they need to make field repairs? Han nodded. They'll have problems their engineers never trained for. Exactly. But we've been making do with less. For decades, every system on this ship has been rebuilt at least twice. We know how to keep fighting when everything should have broken down. In the weapons bay, Han found Lieutenant Choi working with her team to recalibrate the targeting systems. The lieutenant was young but experienced. She had joined the crew 5 years ago and quickly proven herself in several skirmishes with pirates and raiders. Captain, I've been thinking about what Navigator Lee said. If the collective expects us to run, they won't be prepared for aggressive tactics. What do you mean? Their doctrine is based on maintaining formation and using superior firepower to overwhelm enemies from a distance. But what if we force them into close combat? What if we make them fight the kind of battle they're not trained for? Han smiled. Keep working on that idea, Lieutenant. In the medical bay, Dr. Kim was organizing supplies and preparing treatment areas. The doctor had served on the Resilience longer than anyone except Han himself. They had been friends since their academy days. Tae-sung, tell me honestly, what do you think our chances are? The doctor paused in his work. From a purely statistical standpoint, not good. But statistics don't account for everything. They don't measure determination, they don't factor in experience, and they certainly don't consider the bond between a crew and their ship. You think that matters? I know it does. I've seen this crew perform miracles when everything seemed hopeless. The Resilience brings out the best in people. Han continued his walk through the ship. In the communications center, technicians were upgrading their systems to handle coordination with other human vessels. In the navigation department, junior officers were plotting possible course vectors for the coming battle. Everywhere he went, Han saw the same thing. People working with quiet determination. No panic, no despair, just the steady focus of professionals preparing for a difficult job. He ended his walk in the small chapel he had created years ago. It wasn't dedicated to any particular religion, just a quiet space where crew members could find peace and reflection. Some prayed to ancient gods, others meditated in silence. A few simply sat and thought about home. Han sat in the front row of simple chairs and looked at the small viewing port that showed the stars outside. He didn't pray in the traditional sense. Instead, he spoke quietly to the ship herself. "Well, old friend, here we are again, facing impossible odds with nothing but our wits and our stubbornness. I know you're tired. I know your joints ache and your systems strain with every jump, but I need you to hold together a little longer." The ship creaked softly around him, as if responding to his words. Or maybe it was just the normal sounds of metal and machinery adjusting to the stresses of space travel. Han chose to believe it was an answer. "I promise you this. If you keep flying, I'll keep fighting. If you keep your crew safe, I'll find a way to win. We've come too far together to give up now." He sat in the chapel for another hour, planning and thinking. When he finally left, his mind was clear. The path ahead would be dangerous. The odds were terrible. Many good people might not survive the coming battle, but humanity would not surrender. The resilience would not retreat. And somewhere, in the darkness between stars, the collective was about to learn what happened when they threatened the wrong species. 3 days after receiving the ultimatum, the UES Resilience arrived at the emergency fleet gathering point near Proxima Station. Han stood on his bridge watching other human ships arrive from across the sector. Each vessel brought more crew members who would face the impossible together. The massive space station served as the meeting point for what might be humanity's last stand. Representatives from allied species had traveled here to witness the emergency. Council. Some came to offer support. Others came to see if humanity would fight or surrender. Commander Park handed Han a list of attending vessels. 42 ships total, Captain, mix of cruisers, destroyers, and frigates. Most are older models like us. Han studied the list. He recognized many of the ship names and their captains. These were vessels that had served in the outer colonies for years, ships that had fought pirates, rescued stranded civilians, and kept the peace in distant systems where Fleet Command rarely visited. "Any of the new battle cruisers?" he asked. "3, sir. The Defiant, the Resolute, and the Intrepid, all commissioned within the last 2 years. Admiral Kang Hyunwoo had called the emergency meeting for noon station time. Han transported over with his senior staff. The station's main conference room was larger than anything on the Resilience, but it felt cramped with so many officers present. The Admiral was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent most of his career behind a desk, managing supply lines and personnel assignments. This would be his first major battle command. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Kang began, "we face the gravest threat in human history. The collective fleet consists of over 300 vessels. Their technology surpasses ours in every category. Our intelligence suggests they expect this to be a short conflict." A murmur ran through the assembled officers. 300 ships against 42. The math was simple and terrifying. Ambassador Vex High stepped forward. The alien diplomat represented the Helix Confederation, a small alliance of species that had often clashed with the collective. His blue-scaled skin reflected the lights of the conference room as he spoke. "The collective believes that a show of overwhelming force will make humanity surrender without fighting. They have done this to 12 other species in the past 50 years. Each time the target species chose submission over destruction." "What happened to those species?" asked Dr. Kim. They exist as client states. Their colonies produce resources for the collective. Their ships serve as auxiliaries in the collective fleet. Their children learn collective history instead of their own. Captain Song Min-ho of the battlecruiser. Defiant stood up. He was young for a ship commander, maybe 35 years old. His uniform was crisp, and his ship was the most advanced in the human fleet. Admiral, I propose a tactical withdrawal to the inner systems. We can defend Earth and the core colonies while building more ships. A direct confrontation now would be suicide. Several younger officers nodded in agreement. It seemed like the sensible choice. Preserve the fleet. Protect the most important worlds. Fight again when the odds were better. Han remained silent, but Chief Engineer Yu could not contain himself. Retreat. We're talking about abandoning millions of people in those 12 systems, families who trusted us to protect them. Better to save some than lose everyone, Captain Song replied. My ship alone has more firepower than 10 older vessels. The new battle cruisers are our best hope for the future. Your ship has more firepower, Han said quietly. But has it ever been tested in real combat? Captain Song's face reddened. My crew has trained extensively in simulation exercises. Our tactical systems are state-of-the-art. Simulations are useful, Han agreed. But they don't teach you what happens when your main power conduit gets severed and you have to reroute through the backup systems in 30 seconds. They don't show you how to keep fighting when half your bridge is filled with smoke and your tactical display is showing static. Admiral Kang raised his hand for silence. Captain Han, do you have an alternative proposal? Han stood slowly. Every eye in the room focused on him. Yes, sir. Instead of meeting the collective in open space where their numbers advantage will be decisive, we force them to fight us on our terms. He activated the room's main display and showed a star chart of the Corva system. The asteroid field here is the largest in human space. Thousands of rocks, some as big as small moons. Navigation is difficult even with the best sensors. You want to hide among asteroids? Captain Song asked with obvious disdain. I want to use the environment to level the playing field. Their ships are larger and more powerful, but they're also less maneuverable. In the asteroid field, size becomes a disadvantage. Navigator Lee Soo-jin stepped forward with her data pad. Captain Han is right. I've run the calculations. Ships larger than heavy cruiser class will have serious difficulty maneuvering in the dense sections of the field. But we'll be outnumbered 5-1 even in the asteroids, another captain pointed out. Not if we're smart about it, Lieutenant, Choi said. We divide their fleet, force them to come at us in smaller groups. Make them fight the kind of close-quarters battle their doctrine doesn't prepare them for. Admiral Kang studied the star chart for several minutes. The room remained quiet while he considered the options. Finally, he spoke. Captain Han, I'm placing you in tactical command of the engagement. Select 12 ships and their crews. The rest will remain in reserve. Captain Song stood up angrily. Sir, this is madness. You're giving command to an old man in an obsolete ship. That old man, the Admiral replied firmly, has more combat experience than half this room combined. His obsolete ship has survived battles that would have destroyed newer vessels. Han felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 42 ships, thousands of crew members, the future of humanity in 12 star systems, all depending on his ability to outthink an enemy with superior numbers and technology. I'll need volunteers only, he said. This will be dangerous. No one should be ordered into this fight. Every captain in the room raised their hand. Even. Captain Song, despite his objections, volunteered his ship. Han selected the 12 vessels carefully. All were older ships with experienced crews, captains who had learned to improvise and adapt, engineers who could make repairs under fire, gunners who knew their weapons like old friends. Commander Park organized the logistics, while Chief Engineer Yu met with his counterparts from other ships. They shared modification techniques and repair procedures. The old engineers had learned tricks over the years that no manual contained. As the meeting broke up, Ambassador Vexhai approached Han privately. "Captain, I have been authorized to share certain intelligence about collective tactics, information that might help you understand their weaknesses." "I'm listening." "They have never faced an enemy that refused to fight according to standard doctrine. Their training emphasizes overwhelming force and quick victories. A prolonged battle in difficult conditions is outside their experience." Han nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador." "There is something else. The collective commander is named Drakmar. He is considered one of their finest tactical minds, but he has only fought enemies who were weaker than his forces. He has never been tested by an equal opponent." That night, Han stood alone on his bridge again. The other ships of his small fleet moved through space around the Resilience. Each one carried brave souls willing to risk everything for the chance to remain free. Tomorrow they would jump to the Corva system. Tomorrow they would face an enemy that expected them to surrender or die quickly. Tomorrow they would prove that humanity was neither weak nor predictable. Han placed his hand on the worn railing of his bridge. "One more fight, old girl. The most important one yet." The ship hummed around him, ready for whatever would come. In a few hours, they would show the galaxy what happened when someone threatened the wrong species. Part 5. The Heart of Battle. The battle had been raging for 3 hours when Commander Drakmar realized his mistake. His perfect formation was scattered across the asteroid field. Ships that should have been supporting each other were isolated and fighting alone. The humans had turned his greatest strength into a weakness. "All vessels, withdraw to open space," he commanded. "Reform battle line at coordinate 77 Mark 4. Han heard the enemy transmission and smiled grimly. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The collective was trying to retreat to where their superior numbers would matter again. But retreating through an asteroid field was even more dangerous than advancing through it. "All ships, pursue and harass," Han ordered. "Don't let them reform their lines." The human vessels darted after the retreating collective ships like wolves chasing scattered prey. They struck at engines and navigation systems, trying to disable rather than destroy. A crippled ship would slow down the entire enemy retreat. The Resilience followed a massive collective dreadnought that was backing slowly through a passage between two mountain-sized asteroids. The enemy ship was 3 times larger than Han's vessel, but its size made it clumsy in the tight confines. "Target their rear shield generators," Han told Lieutenant Choi. "If we can knock those out, they'll be vulnerable to pursuit." The Resilience's guns fired repeatedly at the dreadnought's stern. The older weapons might not penetrate the enemy's frontal armor, but the rear shields were weaker. Sparks flew as the shield generators overloaded and failed. "Direct hit," Choi reported. "Their rear shields are down," but the victory celebration was cut short by an urgent transmission from Captain Jung of the destroyer Valiant. "Resilience, be advised. Large enemy formation breaking free from the asteroid field. They're heading for open space." Han checked his tactical display. A group of collective heavy cruisers had managed to extract themselves from the rocks. If they reached open space, they could provide covering fire for the rest of their fleet to escape. Once the enemy reformed their battle line, the human advantage would disappear. "Commander Park, set course to intercept those cruisers. Best possible speed." "Captain, we'll have to go through the densest part of the asteroid field." "Navigator," Lee warned. "The passage is barely wide enough for our ship." "Then we'll make it wide enough." The Resilience turned away from the crippled dreadnought and plunged deeper into the asteroid maze. Her hull scraped against floating rocks as Lee guided them through passages that seemed impossible. Behind them, other collective ships tried to follow, but found the route too narrow for their larger hulls. Chief Engineer Yu's voice came over, the intercom from the engine room. "Captain, I'm pushing the engines past their safety limits. We're running at 110% power." "How long can you maintain that?" "Maybe 20 minutes before we risk a core breach. But it should be enough to get us there." The ship shuddered as they squeezed between two asteroids that were slowly rotating toward each other. For a moment, Han thought they might be crushed between the massive rocks. Then they burst through into open space, directly in the path of the escaping collective cruisers. "All weapons, fire at will," Han commanded. The Resilience opened fire on the surprised enemy ships. Her guns might be old, but they had been maintained with loving care by crews who understood every system. The concentrated barrage caught the lead cruiser unprepared and overwhelmed its forward shields. The enemy ships returned fire, but they were caught between the Resilience and the asteroid field. They could not maneuver freely without risking collision with the rocks behind them. Han used this to his advantage, keeping his ship positioned where the enemy could not bring all their weapons to bear. "Hull breach on Deck 5, Commander Park reported as enemy fire found its mark. "Damage. Control teams responding." Dr. Kim had established emergency medical stations throughout the ship as casualties mounted. The old ship's simple design proved its worth again, as damaged systems could be bypassed and repaired more easily than the complex networks of newer vessels. The battle was interrupted by another urgent transmission. This one came from Admiral Kang aboard the command station far from the fighting. "All ships be advised. Reserve fleet is moving to assist. ETA 15 minutes. Han felt a mixture of relief and concern. The reserve fleet included Captain Song's battlecruiser Defiant and 2 other modern warships. Their firepower would be welcome, but Han worried about how they would perform in the chaotic conditions of asteroid field combat. His concerns proved justified when the reserve fleet arrived. Captain Song brought his ships in at high speed, expecting to engage the enemy in the open space battle he had trained for. Instead, he found himself facing collective dreadnoughts that had finally broken, free from the asteroids, and were trying to reform their battle line. "Defiant to all ships," Song transmitted. "Engaging enemy battle line. All vessels provide support." The young captain's ship was powerful and well-armed, but he made the mistake of attacking the enemy formation head-on. The collective ships, relieved to finally face an opponent using conventional tactics, concentrated their fire on the advancing battlecruiser. "Captain Song is in trouble," Navigator Lee observed. "His shields are failing under concentrated fire." Han made a quick decision. "All ships, converge on the enemy battle line. Hit them from all directions." The Resilience and her companion vessels abandoned their pursuit of individual targets and rushed to help the embattled battlecruiser. They attacked the collective formation from multiple angles, forcing the enemy to divide their fire. The rescue came just in time. The Defiant's shields collapsed completely, and her hull began showing scorch marks from enemy weapons. But the coordinated attack by Han's ships drew enough fire away for Captain Song to retreat and make emergency repairs. "This is Captain Song," came a transmission on a private channel. "Thank you, Captain Han. I owe you one." "Just stay alive, Captain. We need every ship we can get." The battle entered a new phase as both fleets regrouped. The collective still had superior numbers, but their formation was disrupted, and many ships had suffered damage in the asteroid field. The human fleet was smaller but more coordinated, and they had proven that experience could triumph over technology. Commander Drakmar appeared on the communication channel again. His perfect uniform was now disheveled, and his 4 eyes showed frustration and anger. "Captain Han, you fight without honor, hiding among rocks like a coward instead of meeting us in open battle." "Commander," Han replied calmly, "I fight to win. Honor is something you can afford when you're not trying to protect millions of innocent lives." "Then let us settle this properly. Single combat between our flagships. Winner takes the field." Han looked around his battered bridge. The Resilience had taken significant damage, but she was still fighting. Her crew was tired but determined, and somewhere in the depths of space, families were counting on them to stand firm against tyranny. "Commander Drakmar," Han said slowly, "you have yourself a fight." The 2 flagships began moving toward each other, as the rest of both fleets pulled back to watch. The old human vessel and the massive alien dreadnought would decide the fate of 12 star systems in single combat among the asteroids. The two ships faced each other in the space between asteroids like ancient warriors preparing for a duel. The Resilience looked tiny compared to the massive collective dreadnought, but Han felt no fear. His ship had carried him through 43 years of battles. She would not fail him now. "All stations report ready, Captain," Commander Park announced from her position beside his chair. "Very well. Take us in, Navigator Lee. Nice and steady." Both ships began moving toward each other. The collective dreadnought came forward with all the confidence of superior technology. Its weapons were more powerful, its shields stronger, its armor thicker. By every measure that mattered to military planners, it should win easily. But Han knew something that Commander Drakmar did not. Ships were more than collections of metal and circuits. They were homes to the people who served aboard them. They developed personalities through years of service, and the Resilience had the strongest personality of any ship Han had ever known. The first exchange of fire lit up the space between the asteroids. The dreadnought's plasma cannon sent brilliant streams of energy toward the Resilience. Lieutenant Choi fired back with everything the old ship had, her weapon systems pushed to their absolute limits. The enemy's first salvo struck the Resilience's forward shields and overloaded them instantly. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as the ship shuddered under the impact, but the ancient armor beneath the shields held firm, scarred but not broken. "Forward shields down," Park reported. "Hull integrity at 80%. "Redirect power from life support backup systems," Han ordered. "Give me everything we have for weapons and engines." Chief Engineer Yu's voice came from the engine room. "Captain, I can give you 5 minutes at maximum power. After that, we risk losing everything." "Then, we'd better make those 5 minutes count." The Resilience surged forward with renewed speed. Her weapons fired continuously, sending streams of energy toward the larger ship. The collective vessel's shields absorbed most of the damage, but Han was not trying to destroy his opponent. He was testing for weaknesses. "Their shield generators are located on the dorsal hull," Navigator Lee called out. "If we can get above them, we might be able to target them directly." "How do we get above a ship that size?" Commander Park asked. Han smiled. "We use the asteroids." He ordered the Resilience to dive toward a massive rotating asteroid that was slowly tumbling through space. The collective captain followed, confident that his larger ship could match any maneuver the smaller vessel attempted. But as they approached the asteroid, Han revealed his plan. "All power to engines. Prepare for emergency ascent." The Resilience skimmed the surface of the rotating rock, using its gravity to slingshot upward in a trajectory that brought her over the top of the enemy dreadnought. The collective ship tried to follow but was too massive to make the sharp turn required. "Now!" Han commanded. Lieutenant Choi fired every weapon the ship possessed directly down at the exposed shield generators on the enemy's upper hull. The concentrated barrage was too much for the defensive systems to handle. Explosions blossomed along the dreadnought's spine as critical components overloaded and failed. "Their dorsal shields are down," Choi reported with satisfaction. But Commander Drakmar was not finished. His ship rolled to bring its undamaged ventral weapons to bear on the Resilience. The response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced out toward the smaller ship, striking her hull and tearing through armor that had protected her for decades. The impact threw Han from his chair. Emergency lighting came on as main power failed. Smoke filled the bridge as control consoles overloaded and caught fire. For a moment, it seemed like the old ship had finally met her match. "Damage report," Han called out as he climbed back to his feet. "Main power offline," Park reported through the smoke. "Emergency power only. Hull breaches on multiple decks. We're venting atmosphere on decks 3 through 7. Dr. Kim's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "Multiple casualties." I need damage control teams to help with the wounded. The dreadnought moved closer, preparing to deliver the killing blow. On its bridge, Commander Drakmar prepared to broadcast humanity's defeat to the galaxy. The primitive species would finally learn their place in the cosmic order. But he had made one critical mistake. He had assumed that the Resilience was finished just because her main power was offline. He did not understand that ships like her were built to keep fighting long after newer vessels would have surrendered. "Chief Yu," Han called to the engine room. "Talk to me. Emergency power is holding, Captain. I can give you maybe 30%. Engine power and enough juice for one good weapons volley. But it has to be now." Han looked around his damaged bridge. His crew was injured but still at their stations. His ship was broken but still flying. In that moment, he realized that this was what made humanity different from every other species. In the galaxy, they refused to give up even when giving up was the logical choice. "Navigator Lee, can you plot one more course?" "Yes, sir. Where do you want to go?" "Straight at them. Ramming speed." The Resilience began moving toward the enemy. Dreadnought on emergency power. Her damaged engines strained to build momentum, but slowly she began to accelerate. The collective ship, confident in its victory, did not immediately react to the seemingly suicidal charge. When Commander Drakmar finally realized what was happening, it was too late to maneuver his massive vessel out of the way. But he was not worried. His ship was 10 times larger than the approaching human vessel. A collision would destroy the Resilience while barely damaging his own ship. What he did not account for was Han's timing and experience. At the last possible moment, just as the two ships were about to collide, Han gave his final order. "All weapons, fire everything we have. Point-blank range." The Resilience's guns fired directly into the unshielded hull of the dreadnought from a distance of less than 50 meters. At such close range, even older weapons could penetrate the most advanced armor. Energy beams tore through critical systems, causing cascade failures throughout the enemy ship. The massive vessel began to lose power just as the Resilience rolled aside at the last second, her smaller size allowing her to avoid the collision that would have destroyed both ships. The dreadnought, crippled and powerless, began drifting helplessly among the asteroids. Commander Drakmar's voice came over the communication channel one last time. His confidence was gone, replaced by disbelief and grudging respect. "How did you know your ship could make that maneuver?" Han looked around his battered bridge, at the crew who had trusted him through the most dangerous battle of their lives. "Because I've been listening to her for 43 years. She told me she could do it." With their flagship defeated and their formations scattered, the collective fleet began a general retreat. Ships that had arrived with overwhelming confidence now fled back toward their own space, unwilling to continue a battle they no longer understood. The human victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Species that had submitted to collective demands began to reconsider their positions. Ambassador Vexahai led a coalition of smaller species informally protesting the ultimatum, emboldened by humanity's unexpected success. Admiral Kang arrived 3 days later to assess the damage and found Han in the ship's small chapel. The captain was sitting quietly among the memorial plaques for crew members lost in past battles, finally allowing himself a moment of reflection after the greatest challenge of his career. "The fleet wants to give you a medal," the admiral said, "and they want to promote you to admiral." "Thank you, sir, but I'm happy where I am. They also want to retire the Resilience. Send her to a museum where people can honor her service." Han looked up sharply. "Sir, this ship isn't ready for retirement. She's got a lot of fight left in her." The admiral smiled. "That's what I told them. The Resilience and her captain have earned the right to serve as long as they're able." Commander Park was promoted to captain of her own vessel, a new ship built using lessons learned from the battle. Chief Engineer Yu received recognition for his innovations, and his techniques were adopted throughout the fleet. Navigator Lee and Lieutenant Choi became instructors at the academy, teaching young officers that technology was only as good as the people who used it. But Han remained where he belonged, on the bridge of his old ship. The Resilience was repaired and upgraded, but her essential character remained unchanged. She was still the vessel that had taught him everything about leadership, courage, and the bonds that hold crews together in the darkness between stars. 3. Months after the battle, Han stood alone on his bridge during the night cycle, watching the stars as he had done for so many years. The ship creaked and hummed around him, her familiar sounds now carrying new stories of victory and determination. "Well, old friend," he said quietly to the ship, "we showed them what happens when they threaten the wrong people." The Resilience continued on her patrol route, her running lights cutting through the darkness as she headed toward whatever challenges awaited them among the stars. She was scarred, but unbowed, old but still strong, carrying her crew safely through the infinite. Night, just as she had always done. Behind them, the galaxy was a little bit safer because some people had refused to.